Remember when Farmhouse was all the rage and then it wasn't? You won't even recognize this IKEA shoe cabinet after I give it a modern makeover. This is when a bunch of curved furniture was coming out and I loved that look. That's what I was going for. I glued 2x2s along the side to give me something to nail into, and then I used these 1x8 boards to give me a frame for my curved plywood. This thing is definitely screwed into studs. Bendable plywood is pretty thin, so I thought nails would hold it, but they didn't. I knew I would need additional support, so I took 2 quarter rounds and combined them into one to make it look like one big half round. It covered the front of the leg perfectly. The key was letting this side dry before bending the plywood and attaching it on the other side. Once it was dry, I was able to bend it. I found out that staples held it in place better than nails, and then I used another quarter round to tack it on the side. I wanted the top to be curved as well, so I created a template, cut it out, sanded it down to make it smooth, and it fit really nicely over top of the whole thing. I was already loving the look so far. Obviously, it needed to be painted so it would be all one color, and what color is more modern than black? I primed it with a toddler on my back because what mom doesn't? I used Zinsser Ben primer, which is the best for IKEA pieces, and then I painted it this really pretty black, Dark Secret by Behr. Next was updating the cabinet door faces, and I went outside the box with this one. I had seen a few woven drawer faces on furniture and really liked the look, so I decided to try and incorporate that as well. I started out by using the same Zinsser Ben primer and then painting the cabinet faces because I knew that the color would be peeking through, and then I got to weaving. I used the same reeding that you would use for weaving a basket, and I don't know if you've ever woven a basket, but it is very time consuming and spacing is super important, so I didn't staple it all down until I knew the spacing would work out. I did use staples along the edges and then covered up those staples with a little bit more reeding, and then I ended up finishing it all off with trim around the edges, quarter round trim, painted that same black. Once those were glued and nailed in place, there were gaps around the edges, so I filled those gaps with caulk. Looks like an Oreo, right? Once that caulk was cleaned up and dried, I just went over it with paint, and it actually gave it a really, really nice look and looked finished, looked like it was done on purpose. You could not tell that there had been that gap. I put the cabinets back in place, and I used these very modern handles that did not get in the way of anything. I had a rustic window mirror above the cabinet before, so I wanted to update that as well. In order to do that, I just painted it black. I had to remove all the mirror squares to paint the back of the frames as well, but then it was completely transformed. You never would have guessed this was the same space.